Chapter 9 of Blackfeet Indian Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Blackfeet Indian Stories by George B. Grinnell. Chapter 9. The All Comrades Societies. In the Blackfeet tribe was an association known as the All Comrades. This was made up of a dozen secret societies graded according to age, the members of the younger societies passing, after a few years, into the older ones. This association was in part benevolent and helpful, and in part to encourage bravery in war, but its main purpose was to see that the orders of the chiefs were carried out, and to punish offences against the tribe at large. There are stories which explain how these societies came to be instituted, and this one tells how the Society of Bulls began. The Bulls Society. It was long, long ago, very far back, that this happened. In those days the people used to kill the buffalo by driving them over a steep place near the river, down which they fell into a great pen built at the foot of the cliff, where the buffalo that had not been killed by the fall were shot with arrows by the men. Then the people went into the pen and skinned the buffalo, and cut them up and carried the meat away to their camp. This pen they called piskun. In those days the people had built a great piskun with high, strong walls. No buffalo could jump over it, not even if a great crowd of them ran against it, could they push it down. The young men kept going out, as they always did, to try to bring the buffalo to the edge of the cliff, but somehow they would not jump over into the piskun. When they had come almost to the edge, they would turn off to one side or the other, and run down the sloping hills and away over the prairie. So the people could get no food, and they began to be hungry, and at last to starve. Early one morning a young woman, the daughter of a brave man, was going from her lodge down to the stream to get water, and as she went along she saw a herd of buffalo feeding on the prairie, close to the edge of the cliff above the great piskun. "Oh," she called out, "if you will only jump off into the piskun, I will marry one of you." She did not mean this, but said it just in fun, and as soon as she had said it, she wondered greatly when she saw the buffalo come jumping over the edge, falling down the cliff. A moment later a big bull jumped high over the wall of the piskun and came toward her, and now, truly, she was frightened. "Come," he said, taking hold of her arm. "No, no," she answered, trying to pull herself away. "But you said if the buffalo would only jump over, you would marry one of them. Look, the piskun is full." She did not answer, and without saying anything more he led her up over the bluff and out on the prairie. After the people had finished killing the buffalo and cutting up the meat, they missed this young woman. No one knew where she had gone, and her relations were frightened and very sad because they could not find her. So her father took his bow and quiver and put them on his back and said, "I will go and find her," and he climbed the bluff and set out over the prairie. He travelled some distance but saw nothing of his daughter. The sun was hot, and at length he came to a buffalo wallow in which some water was standing, and drank and sat down to rest. A little way off on the prairie he saw a herd of buffalo. As the man sat there by the wallow, trying to think what he might do to find his daughter, a magpie came up and alighted on the ground near him. The man spoke to it, saying, "Mami Atsikimi, magpie, you are a beautiful bird. Help me, for I am very unhappy. As you travel about over the prairie, look everywhere, and if you see my daughter, say to her, 'Your father is waiting by the wallow.'" Soon the magpie flew away, and as he passed near the herd of buffalo he saw the young woman there, and alighting on the ground near her, he began to pick at things, turning his head this way and that, and seeming to look for food. When he was close to the girl he said to her, "Your father is waiting by the wallow." "Shh, shh," replied the girl in a whisper, looking about her very much frightened, for her bull husband was sleeping close by. "Do not speak so loud. Go back and tell him to wait." "Your daughter is over there with the buffalo. She says, 'Wait,'" said the magpie when he had flown back to the poor father. After a little time the bull awoke and said to his wife, "Go and bring me some water." Then the woman was glad, and she took a horn from her husband's head and went to the wallow for water. "Oh, why did you come?" she said to her father. "They will surely kill you." "I came to take my daughter back to my lodge." "Come, let us go." "No," said the girl, "not now. They will surely chase us and kill us. Wait until he sleeps again and I will try to get away." Then she filled the horn with water and went back to the buffalo. Her husband drank a swallow of the water, and when he took the horn it made a noise. "Ah," he said, as he looked about, "a person is somewhere close by." "No one," replied the girl, but her heart stood still. The bull drank again. Then he stood up on his feet and moaned and grunted. "Ma-moo! Boo!" Fearful was the sound. Up rose the other bulls, raised their tails in the air, tossed their heads and bellowed back to him. Then they pawed the earth, thrust their horns into it, rushed here and there, and presently, coming to the wallow, found there the poor man. They rushed over him, trampling him with their great hoofs, thrust their horns into his body and tore him to pieces, and trampled him again. Soon not even a piece of his body could be seen, only the wet earth cut up by their hoofs. Then his daughter mourned in sorrow. "Oh, ah, ni na ah! Oh, ah, ni na ah! Ah, my father, my father!" "Ah," said her bull husband, "now you understand how it is that we feel. You mourn for your father, but we have seen our fathers, mothers, and many of our relations fall over the high cliffs to be killed for food by your people. But now I will pity you. I will give you one chance. If you can bring your father to life, you and he may go back to your camp." Then said the woman, "Ah, Magpie, pity me, help me, for now I need help. Look in the trampled mud of the wallow and see if you can find even a little piece of my father's body, and bring it to me." Swiftly the magpie flew to the wallow, and alighting there, walked all about, looking in every hole and even tearing up the mud with his sharp beak. Presently he uncovered something white, and as he picked the mud from about it, he saw it was a bone, and pulling hard, he dragged it from the mud, the joint of a man's backbone. Then gladly he flew back with it to the woman. The girl put the bone on the ground and covered it with her robe, and began to sing. After she had sung, she took the robe away, and there under it lay her father's body, as if he had just died. Once again she covered the body with the robe and sang. And this time, when she took the robe away, the body was breathing. A third time she covered the body with the robe, and sang, and when she again took away the robe, the body moved its arms and legs a little. A fourth time she covered it and sang, and when she took away the robe, her father stood up. The buffalo were surprised, and the magpie was glad, and flew about, making a great noise. "Now this day we have seen a strange thing," said her bull husband. "The people's medicine is strong. He whom we trampled to death, whom our hoofs cut to pieces and mixed all up with the soil, is alive again. Now you shall go to your home, but before you go we will teach you our dance and our song. Do not forget them." The buffalo showed the man and his daughter their dance and taught them the songs, and then the bull said to them, "Now you are to go back to your home, but do not forget what you have seen. Teach the people this dance and these songs, and while they are dancing it, let them wear a bull's head and a robe. Those who are to be the head of the Bull Society shall wear them." When the poor man returned with his daughter, all the people were glad. Then after a time he called a council of the chiefs and told them the things that had happened. The chiefs chose certain young men to be bulls, and the man taught them the dance and the song, and told them everything that they should do. So began the Bull Society. End of chapter 9.
Chapter 10 of Blackfeet Indian Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by MCY. Blackfeet Indian Stories by George B. Grinnell. Chapter 10 The Other Societies. For a long time the buffalo had not been seen. Everyone was hungry, for the hunters could find no food for the people. A certain man, who had 2 wives, a daughter, and 2 sons, as he saw what the hard time they were having, said, "I shall not stop here to die. Tomorrow we will move toward the mountains, where we may kill elk and deer and sheep and antelope, or, if not these, at least we shall find beaver and birds, and can get them. In this way we shall have food to eat and shall live." Next morning they caught their dogs and harnessed them to the travois, and took their loads on their backs and set out. It was still winter, and they traveled slowly. Besides, they were weak for hunger and could go only a short distance in a day. The fourth night came, and they sat in their lodge, tired and hungry. No one spoke, for people who are hungry do not care to talk. Suddenly outside the dogs began to bark, and soon the door was pushed aside and a young man entered. "Welcome," said the man, and he motioned to a place where the stranger should sit. Now during this day there had been blowing a warm wind which had melted the snow so that the prairie was covered with water, yet this young man's moccasins and leggings were dry. They saw this and were frightened. They sat there for a long time saying nothing. Then the young man spoke and asked, "Why is this? Why do you not give me food?" "Ah," replied the father, "you see here people who are truly poor. We have no food. For many days the buffalo do not come inside, and we looked for deer and other animals, which people eat, and when these had all been killed we began to starve. Then I said, 'We will not stay here to die from hunger,' and we set out for the mountains. This is the fourth night of our travels." "Ah," said the young man, "then your travels are ended. You need go no farther. Close by here is our piskun. Many buffalo have been run in, and our parfleches are filled with dried meat. Wait a little. I will go and bring you some." And he went out. As soon as he had gone, they began to talk about this strange person. They were afraid of him and did not know what to do. The children began to cry, and the women tried to quiet them. Presently the young man came back, bringing some meat. "There is food," said he, as he put it down by the woman. "Now tomorrow move your camp over to our lodges. Do not fear anything. No matter what strange things you may see, do not fear. All will be your friends. Yet about one thing I must warn you. In this you should be careful. If you should find an arrow lying about anywhere, in the piskun or outside, do not touch it. Neither you, nor your wives, nor your children." When he had said this, he went out. The father took his pipe and filled it, and smoked and prayed to all the powers, saying, "Hear now, son. Listen above people. Listen underwater people. Now you have taken pity. Now you have given us food. We are going to those mysterious ones who walk through water with dry moccasins. Protect us among these to be feared people. Let us live. Man, woman, and child, give us long life." Now from the fire again arose the smell of roasting meat. The children ate and played. Those who so long had been silent now talked and laughed. Early in the morning, as soon as the sun had risen, they took down their lodge and packed their dogs and started for the camp of the stranger. When they had come to where they could see it, they found it a wonderful place. There around the piskun, and stretching far up and down the valley, were pitched the lodges of the meat eaters. They could not see them all, but nearby they saw the lodges of the bear band, the fox band, and the raven band. The father of the young man who had visited them and given them meat was the chief of the wolf band, and by that band they pitched their lodge. Truly that was a happy place. Food was plenty. All day long people were shouting out for feasts, and everywhere was heard the sound of drumming and singing and dancing. The newly come people went to the piskun for meat, and there one of the children saw an arrow lying on the ground. It was a beautiful arrow, the stone point long, slender, and sharp, the shaft round and straight. The boy remembered what had been said, and he looked around fearfully, but everywhere the people were busy. No one was looking. He picked up the arrow and put it under his robe. Then there rose a terrible sound. All the animals howled and growled and rushed toward him, but the chief wolf got to him first, and holding up his hand said, "Wait! He is young, and not yet of good sense. We will let him go this time." They did not think to him. When night came, someone shouted out, calling people to a feast and saying, "Listen, listen, wolf, you are to eat. Enter with your friend." "We are invited," said the chief wolf to his new friend, and together they went to the lodge from which the call came. Within the lodge the fire burned brightly, and seated around it were many men, the old and wise of the raven band. On the lodge lining, hanging behind the seats, were the paintings of many great deeds. Food was placed before the guests, pemmican and berries and dried back fat, and after they had eaten the pipe was lighted and passed around the circle. Then the Raven chief spoke and said, "Now, Wolf, I am going to give our new friend a present. What do you think of that?" "It shall be as you say," replied the Wolf. "Our new friend will be glad." From a long parfleche sack the Raven chief took a slender stick, beautifully ornamented with many colored feathers. To the end of the stick was tied the skin of a raven, head, wings, feet, and tail. "We," said the Raven chief, "are those who carry the raven. Mas topa takix. Of all the flyers, of all the birds, what one is so smart as the raven? None. The raven's eyes are sharp, his wings are strong. He is a great hunter and never hungry. Far off on the prairie he sees his food, and if it is deep hidden in the forest it does not escape him. This is our song and our dance." When he had finished singing and dancing, he placed the stick in the sack and gave it to the man and said, "Take it with you, and when you have returned to your people you shall say, 'Now there are already the bulls,' and he who is the Raven chief said, 'There shall be more. There shall be the All Friends, Ikun u Katsi, so that the people may live, and of the All Friends shall be the raven bearers. You shall call a council of the chiefs and wise old men, and they shall choose the persons who are to belong to the society. Teach them the song and the dance, and give them the medicine. It shall be theirs forever." Soon they heard another person shouting out the feast call, and going they entered the lodge of the chief of the Kit Foxes, Sinopa. Here too old men had gathered. After they had eaten of the food set before them, the chief said, "Those among whom you have just come are generous. They do not look carefully at the things they have, but give to the stranger and pity the poor. The Kit Fox is a little animal, but what one is smarter? None. His hair is like the dead grass of the prairie. His eyes are keen. His feet make no noise when he walks. His brain is cunning. His ears receive the far-off sound. Here is our medicine. Take it." He gave the man the stick. It was long, crooked at one end, wound with fur, and tied here and there with eagle feathers. At the end was a kit fox skin. Again the chief spoke and said, "Listen to our song. Do not forget it, and the dance too you must remember. When you reach home, teach them to the people." He sang and danced. Then presently his guests departed. Again they heard the feast shout, and he who called was the chief of the Bear Society. After they had eaten and smoked, the chief said, "What is your opinion, friend Wolf? Shall we give our new friend a present?" "It shall be as you say," replied the Wolf. "It is yours to give." Then spoke the Bear, saying, "There are many animals and some of them are powerful, but the bear is the strongest and greatest of all. He fears nothing and is always ready to fight." Then he put on a necklace of bear claws, a band of bear fur about his head, and a belt of bear fur, and sang and danced. When he had finished, he gave the things he had worn to the man and said, "Teach the people our song and our dance, and give them this medicine. It is powerful." It was very late. The 7 stars had come to the middle of the night, yet again they heard the feast shout from the far end of the camp. In this lodge the men were painted with streaks of red, and their hair was all pushed to one side. After the feast the chief said, "We are different from all others here. We are called the Braves, Mut Six. We know not fear. We are death. Even if our enemies are as many as the grass, we do not turn away, but fight and conquer. Bows are good weapons, lances are better, but our weapon is the knife." Then the chief sang and danced, and afterward he gave the Wolf chief's friend the medicine. It was a long knife, and many scalps were tied on the handle. "This," said he, "is for the All Friends." To one more lodge they were called that night, and the lodge owner taught the man his song and dance, and gave him his medicine. Then the Wolf chief and his friend went home and slept. Early next day the Blackfeet women began to take down the lodge and to get ready to move their camp. Many women came and made them presents of food, dried meat, pemmican, and berries. They were given so much that they could not take it all with them. It was long before they joined the main camp, for it had moved south, looking for buffalo. When they reached the camp, as soon as the lodge was pitched, the man called all the chiefs to come and feast with him, and told them what he had seen, and showed them the different medicines. Then the chiefs chose certain young men to belong to the different societies, and these men taught them the songs and dances, and gave its medicine to each society. End of chapter 10. Chapter 11 of Blackfeet Indian Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by MCY. Blackfeet Indian Stories by George B. Grinnell. Chapter 11. The First Medicine Lodge. The chief god of the Blackfeet is the sun. He made the world and rules it, and to him the people pray. One of his names is Napi, Old Man, but there is another Napi who is very different from the sun, and instead of being great, wise, and wonderful, is foolish, mean, and contemptible. We shall hear about him further on. Every year in summer, about the time the berries ripen, the Blackfeet used to hold a great festival and sacrifice, which we call the ceremony of the Medicine Lodge. This was a time of happy meetings, of feasting, of giving presents. But besides this rejoicing, those men who wished to have good luck in whatever they might undertake tried to prove their prayers sincere by sacrificing their bodies, torturing themselves in ways that caused great suffering. In ancient times, as we are told in books of history, things like that used to happen among many peoples all over the world. It was a law that the building of the Medicine Lodge must always be pledged by a good woman. If a woman had a son or a husband away at war and feared that he was in danger, or if she had a child that was sick and might die, she might pray for the safety of the one she loved, and promise that if he returned or recovered, she would build a medicine lodge. This pledge was made in a loud voice, publicly, in open air, so that all might know the promise had been made. At the time appointed, all the tribe came together and pitched their lodges in a great circle, and within this circle the medicine lodge was built. The ceremony lasted for 4 days and 4 nights, during which time the woman who had promised to make the medicine lodge neither ate nor drank, except once in sacrifice. Different stories are told of how the first medicine lodge came to be built. This is one of those stories. In the earliest times there was a man who had a very beautiful daughter. Many young men wished to marry her, but whenever she was asked, she shook her head and said she did not wish to marry. "Why is this?" said her father. "Some of these young men are rich, handsome, and brave." "Why should I marry?" replied the girl. "My father and mother take care of me. Our lodge is good. The parfleches are never empty. There are plenty of tanned robes and soft furs for winter. Why trouble me then?" Soon after, the raven bearers held a dance. They all painted themselves nicely and wore their finest ornaments, and each one tried to dance the best. Afterward, some of them asked for this girl, but she said no. After that, the bulls, the kit foxes, and others of the all Comrades held their dances, and many men who were rich and some great warriors asked this man for his daughter, but to every one she said no. Then her father was angry, and he said, "Why is this? All the best men have asked for you, and still you say no." Then the girl said, "Father, listen to me. That above person, the sun, said to me, 'Do not marry any of these men, for you belong to me. Listen to what I say, and you shall be happy and live to a great age." And again he said to me, "Take heed. You must not marry. You are mine." "Ah," replied her father, "it must always be as he says," and they spoke no more about it. There was a poor young man. He was very poor. His father, his mother, and all his relations were dead. He had no lodge, no wife to tan his robes or make his moccasins. His clothes were always old and worn. He had no home. Today he stopped in one lodge, then tomorrow he ate and slept in another. Thus he lived. He had a good face, but on his cheek was a bad scar. After they had held those dances, some of the young men met this poor Scarface, and they laughed at him and said, "Why do not you ask that girl to marry you? You are so rich and handsome." Scarface did not laugh. He looked at them and said, "I will do as you say. I will go and ask her." All the young men thought this was funny. They laughed a good deal at Scarface as he was walking away. Scarface went down by the river and waited there, near the place where the women went to get water. By and by the girl came there. Scarface spoke to her and said, "Girl, stop. I want to speak with you. I do not wish to do anything secretly, but I speak to you here openly, where the sun looks down and all may see." "Speak then," said the girl. "I have seen the day," said Scarface. "I have seen how you have refused all those men who are young and rich and brave. Today some of these young men laughed and said to me, 'Why do not you ask her?' I am poor. I have no lodge, no food, no clothes, no robes. I have no relations. All of them have died. Yet now today I say to you, take pity. Be my wife." The girl hid her face in her robe and brushed the ground with the point of her moccasin, back and forth, for she was thinking. After a time she spoke and said, "It is true I have refused all those rich young men, yet now a poor one asks me, and I am glad. I will be your wife, and my people will be glad. You are poor, but that does not matter. My father will give you dogs. My mother will make us a lodge. My relations will give us robes and furs. You will no longer be poor." Then the young man was glad, and he started forward to kiss her. But she put out her hand and held him back and said, "Wait. The Sun has spoken to me. He said I may not marry, that I belong to him, that if I listen to him I shall live to great age. So now I say, go to the Sun. Say to him, 'She whom you spoke with has listened to your words. She has never done wrong, but now she wants to marry. I want her for my wife. Ask him to take that scar from your face. That will be his sign, and I shall know he is pleased. But if he refuses, or if you cannot find his lodge, then do not return to me." "Oh," cried Scarface, "at first your words were good. I was glad. But now it is dark. My heart is dead. Where is that far-off lodge? Where is the trail that no one yet has traveled?" Take courage, said the girl softly, and she went on to her lodge. Scarface was very unhappy. He did not know what to do. He sat down and covered his face with his robe and tried to think. At length he stood up and went to an old woman who had been kind to him and said to her, "Pity me. I am very poor. I am going away on a long journey. Make me some moccasins." "Where are you going, far from the camp?" asked the old woman. "I do not know where I am going," he replied. "I am in trouble, but I cannot talk about it." This old woman had a kind heart. She made him moccasins, 7 pairs, and gave him also a sack of food, pemmican, dried meat, and back fat. All alone, and with a sad heart, Scarface climbed the bluff that overlooked the valley, and when he had reached the top, turned to look back at the camp. He wondered if he should ever see it again, if he should return to the girl and to the people. "Pity me, O Sun," he prayed, and turning away, he set off to look for the trail to the Sun's lodge. For many days he went on. He crossed great prairies and followed up timbered rivers and crossed the mountains. Every day his sack of food grew lighter, but as he went along he looked for berries and roots, and sometimes he killed an animal. These things gave him food. One night he came to the home of a wolf. "Ha!" said the wolf. "What are you doing so far from your home?" "I am looking for the place where the Sun lives," replied Scarface. "I have been sent to speak with him." "I have traveled over much country," said the wolf. "I know all the prairies, the valleys, and the mountains, but I have never seen the Sun's home. But wait a moment. I know a person who is very wise, and who may be able to tell you the road. Ask the bear." The next day Scarface went on again, stopping now and then to rest and to pick berries, and when night came he was at the bear's lodge. "Where is your home?" asked the bear. "Why are you traveling so far alone?" "Ah," replied the man, "I have come to you for help. Pity me. Because of what that girl said to me, I am looking for the Sun. I wish to ask him for her." "I do not know where he lives," said the bear. "I have traveled by many rivers, and I know the mountains, yet I have not seen his lodge. Farther on there is someone, that striped face, who knows a great deal. Ask him." When the young man got there, the badger was in his hole, but Scarface called to him, "Oh, cunning striped face, I wish to speak with you." The badger put his head out of the hole and said, "What do you want, my brother?" "I wish to find the Sun's home," said Scarface. "I wish to speak with him." "I do not know where he lives," answered the badger. "I never travel very far. Over there in the timber is the Wolverine. He is always traveling about and knows many things. Perhaps he can tell you." Scarface went over to the forest and looked all about for the Wolverine, but could not see him, so he sat down on a log to rest. "Alas, alas!" he cried. "Wolverine, take pity on me. My food is gone, my moccasins are worn out. I fear I shall die." Someone close to him said, "What is it, my brother?" and looking around, he saw the Wolverine sitting there. "She whom I wish to marry belongs to the Sun," said Scarface. "I am trying to find where he lives, so that I may ask him for her." "Ah," said the Wolverine, "I know where he lives. It is nearly night now, but tomorrow I will show you the trail to the big water. He lives on the other side of it." Early in the morning they set out, and the Wolverine showed Scarface the trail, and he followed it until he came to the water's edge. When he looked out over it, his heart almost stopped. Never before had any one seen such a great water. The other side could not be seen, and there was no end to it. Scarface sat down on the shore. This seemed the end. His food was gone, his moccasins were worn out, he had no longer strength, no longer courage. His heart was sick. "I cannot cross this great water," he said. "I cannot return to the people. Here by this water I shall die." Yet, even as he thought this, helpers were near. Two swans came swimming up to the shore and said to him, "Why have you come here? What are you doing?" "It is very far to the place where your people live." "I have come here to die," replied Scarface. "Far away in my country is a beautiful girl. I want to marry her, but she belongs to the Sun. So I set out to find him and ask him for her. I have traveled many days. My food is gone. I cannot go back. I cannot cross this great water, so I must die." "No," said the swans. "It shall not be so. Across this water is the home of that above person. Get on our backs and we will take you there." Scarface stood up. Now he felt strong and full of courage. He waded out into the water and lay down on the swans' backs and they swam away. It was a fearful journey, for that water was deep and black, and in it lived strange people and great animals which might reach up and seize a person and pull him down under the water. Yet the swans carried Scarface safely to the other side. There was seen a broad, hard trail leading back from the water's edge. "There," said the swans, "you are now close to the Sun's lodge. Follow that trail, and soon you will see it." Scarface started to walk along the trail, and after he had gone a little way he came to some beautiful things lying in the trail. There was a war shirt, a shield, a bow, and a quiver of arrows. He had never seen such fine weapons. He looked at them, but he did not touch them, and at last walked around them and went on. A little farther along he met a young man, a very handsome person. His hair was long, his clothing was made of strange skins, and his moccasins were sewed with bright feathers. The young man spoke to him and asked, "Did you see some weapons lying in the trail?" "Yes," replied Scarface, "I saw them." "Did you touch them?" said the young man. "No," said Scarface. "I suppose someone had left them there, and I did not touch them." "You do not meddle with the property of others," said the young man. "What is your name, and where are you going?" Scarface told him. Then said the young man, "My name is Early Riser, the Morning Star. The sun is my father. Come, I will take you to our lodge. My father is not at home now, but he will return at night." At length they came to the lodge. It was large and handsome, and on it were painted strange medicine animals. On a tripod behind the lodge were the Sun's weapons and his war clothing. Scarface was ashamed to go into the lodge, but Morning Star said, "Friend, do not be afraid. We are glad you have come." When they went in, a woman was sitting there, the Moon, the Sun's wife and the mother of Morning Star. She spoke to Scarface kindly and gave him food to eat, and when he had eaten she asked, "Why have you come so far from your people?" So Scarface told her about the beautiful girl that he wished to marry and said, "She belongs to the Sun. I have come to ask him for her." When it was almost night and time for the Sun to come home, the Moon hid Scarface under a pile of robes. As soon as the Sun got to the doorway he said, "A strange person is here." "Yes, father," said Morning Star. "A young man has come to see you. He is a good young man, for he found some of my things in the trail and did not touch them." Scarface came out from under the robes, and the Sun entered the lodge and sat down. He spoke to Scarface and said, "I am glad you have come to our lodge. Stay with us as long as you like. Sometimes my son is lonely. Be his friend." The next day the two young men were talking about going hunting, and the Moon spoke to Scarface and said, "Go with my son where you like, but do not hunt near that big water. Do not let him go there. That is the home of great birds with long, sharp bills. They kill people. I have had many sons, but these birds have killed them all. Only Morning Star is left." Scarface stayed a long time in the Sun's lodge, and every day went hunting with Morning Star. One day they came near the water and saw the big birds. "Come on," said Morning Star, "let us go and kill those birds." "No, no," said Scarface, "we must not go there. Those are terrible birds. They will kill us." Morning Star would not listen. He ran toward the water and Scarface ran after him, for he knew that he must kill the birds and save the boy's life. He ran ahead of Morning Star and met the birds, which were coming to fight, and killed every one of them with his spear. Not one was left. The young man cut off the heads of the birds and carried them home, and when Morning Star's mother heard what they had done, and they showed her the birds' heads, she was glad. She cried over the two young men and called Scarface my son. And when the Sun came home at night, she told him about it, and he too was glad. "My son," he said to Scarface, I will not forget what you have this day done for me. Tell me now what I can do for you. What is your trouble?" "Alas, alas," replied Scarface. "Pity me. I came here to ask you for that girl. I want to marry her. I asked her and she was glad, but she says that she belongs to you, and that you told her not to marry." "What you say is true," replied the Sun. "I have seen the days and all that she has done. Now I give her to you. She is yours. I am glad that she has been wise, and I know that she has never done wrong. The Sun takes care of good women. They shall live a long life, and so shall their husbands and children. Now soon you will go home. I wish to tell you something, and you must be wise and listen. I am the only chief. Everything is mine. I made the earth, the mountains, the prairies, the rivers, and the forests. I made the people and all the animals. This is why I say that I alone am chief. I can never die. It is true the winter makes me old and weak, but every summer I grow young again. What one of all the animals is the smartest?" the Sun went on. "It is the raven, for he always finds food. He is never hungry. Which one of all the animals is the most to be reverenced? It is the buffalo. Of all the animals I like him best. He is for the people. He is your food and your shelter. What part of his body is sacred? It is the tongue. That belongs to me. What else is sacred? Berries. They too are mine. Come with me now and see the world." The Sun took Scarface to the edge of the sky, and they looked down and saw the world. It is flat and round, and all around the edge it goes straight down. Then said the Sun, "If any man is sick or in danger, his wife may promise to build me a lodge if he recovers. If the woman is good, then I shall be pleased and help the man. But if she is not good, or if she lies, then I shall be angry. You shall build the lodge like the world, round with walls, but first you must build a sweat lodge of 100 sticks. It shall be arched like the sky, and one half of it shall be painted red for me, the other half you shall paint black for the night." He told Scarface all about making the medicine lodge, and when he had finished speaking, he rubbed some medicine on the young man's face, and the scar that had been there disappeared. He gave him 2 raven feathers, saying, "These are a sign for the girl that I gave her to you. They must always be worn by the husband of the woman who builds a medicine lodge." Now Scarface was ready to return home. The Sun and Morning Star gave him many good presents. The Moon cried and kissed him, and was sorry to see him go. Then the Sun showed him the short trail. It was the Wolf Road, the Milky Way. He followed it and soon reached the ground. It was a very hot day. All the lodge skins were raised, and the people sat in the shade. There was a chief, a very generous man, who all day long was calling out for feasts, and people kept coming to his lodge to eat and smoke with him. Early in the morning this chief saw sitting on a butte near by a person close wrapped in his robe. All day long this person sat there and did not move. When it was almost night the chief said, "That person has sat there all day in the strong heat, and he has not eaten or drunk. Perhaps he is a stranger. Go and ask him to come to my lodge." Some young men ran up to the person and said to him, "Why have you sat here all day in the great heat? Come to the shade of the lodges. The chief asks you to eat with him." The person rose and threw off his robe, and the young men were surprised. He wore fine clothing. His bow, shield, and other weapons were of strange make, but they knew his face, although the scar was gone, and they ran ahead shouting, "The scar-faced poor young man has come. He is poor no longer. The scar on his face is gone." All the people hurried out to see him and to ask him questions. "Where did you get all these fine things?" He did not answer. There in the crowd stood a young woman, and taking the 2 raven feathers from his head, he gave them to her and said, "The trail was long and I nearly died. but by those helpers I found his lodge. He is glad. He sent these feathers to you. They are the sign." Great was her gladness then. They were married and made the first medicine lodge, as the Sun had said. The Sun was glad. He gave them great age. They were never sick. When they were very old, one morning their children called to them, "Awake, rise and eat." They did not move. In the night, together in sleep, without pain, their shadows had departed to the sand hills. End of chapter 11.
Chapter 12 of Blackfeet Indian Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Blackfeet Indian Stories by George Bird Grinnell. Chapter 12, The Buffalo Painted Lodges. Read by Melissa Bassel, Whitchurch, Buckinghamshire, United Kingdom. The Buffalo Painted Lodges. The old lodges of the Piegans were made of buffalo skin and were painted with pictures of different kinds, birds or animals or trees or mountains. It is believed that in most cases the first painter of any lodge was taught how he should paint it in a dream, but this was not always the case. Two of the most important lodges in the Blackfeet camp are known as the Inniskim Lodges. Both are painted with figures of buffalo, one with black buffalo and the other with yellow buffalo. Certain of the Inniskim are kept in these lodges and can be kept in no others. This story tells how these two lodges came to be made. The painters were told what to do long, long ago, in about the second generation after the first people. In those days, the old Piegans lived in the north, close to the Red Deer River. The camp moved, and the lodges were pitched on the river. One day, two old men who were close friends had gone out from the camp to find some straight cherry shoots with which to make arrows. After they had gathered their shafts, they sat down on a high bank by the river and began to peel the bark from the shoots. The river was high. One of these men was named Weaselheart, and the other Fisher. As they sat there, Weaselheart chanced to look down into the water and saw something. He said to his comrade, "Friend, do you not see something down there where the water goes around?" Fisher said, "No, I see nothing except buffalo," for he was looking across the river to the other side, and not down into the water. "No," said Weaselheart, "I do not mean over there on the prairie. Look down into that deep hole in the river, and you will see a lodge there." Fisher looked as he had been told, and saw the lodge. Weaselheart said, "There is a lodge painted with black buffalo." As he spoke thus, Fisher said, "I see another lodge standing in front of it." Weaselheart saw that lodge too, the yellow-painted buffalo lodge. The two men wondered at this and could not understand how it could be, but they were both men of strong hearts, and presently Weaselheart said, "Friend, I shall go down to enter that lodge. Do you sit here and tell me when I get to the place." Then Weaselheart went up the river and found a drift log to support him and pushed it out into the water, and floated down toward the cut bank. When he had reached the place where the lodge stood, Fisher told him, and he let go the log and dived down into the water and entered the lodge. In it he found two persons who owned the lodge, a man and his wife. The man said to him, "You are welcome," and Weaselheart sat down. Then spoke the owner of the lodge, saying, "My son, this is my lodge, and I give it to you. Look well at it inside and outside, and make your lodge like this. If you do that, it may be a help to you." Fisher sat a long time waiting for his friend, but at last he looked down the stream and saw a man on the shore walking toward him. He came along the bank until he had reached his friend. It was Weaselheart. Fisher said to him, "I have been waiting a long time, and I was afraid that something bad had happened to you." Weaselheart asked him, "Did you see me?" "I saw you," said Fisher, "when you went into that lodge. Did you, when you came out of the lodge, see there in the water another lodge painted with yellow buffalo? Is it still there?" Weaselheart said, "I saw it. It is there. Go you into the water as I did." Then Fisher went up the stream as his friend had gone, and entered the water at the same place, and swam down as Weaselheart had done. And when Weaselheart showed him the place, he dived down and disappeared as Weaselheart had disappeared. he entered the yellow-painted buffalo lodge, and his friend saw him go into it. In the lodge were two persons, a man and his wife. The man said to him, "You are welcome. Sit there." He spoke further, saying, "My son, you have seen this lodge of mine. I give it to you. Look carefully at it, inside and outside, and fix up your lodge in that way. It may be a help to you hereafter." Then Fisher went out. Weasel Heart waited for his friend as long as Fisher had waited for him, and when Fisher came out of the water, it was at the place where Weasel Heart had come out. Then the two friends went home to the camp. When the two had come to a hill near the camp, they met a young man, and by him sent word that the people should make a sweat house for them. After the sweat house had been made, word was sent to them, and they entered the camp and went into the sweat house and took a sweat. And all the time while they were sweating, sand was falling from their bodies. Some time after that, the people moved camp and went out and killed buffalo, and these two men made two lodges, and painted them just as the lodges were painted that they had seen in the river. These two men had strong power which came to them from the underwater people. Once the people wished to cross the river, but the stream was deep and it was always hard for them to get across. Often the dogs and the travois were swept away, and the people lost many of their things. At this time the tribe wished to cross, and Fisher and Weasel Heart said to each other, "The people want to cross the river, but it is high and they cannot do so. Let us try to make a crossing so that it will be easier for them." So Weasel Heart alone crossed the river and sat on the bank on the other side, and Fisher sat opposite to him on the bank where the camp was. Then Fisher said to the people, "Pack up your things now and get ready to cross. I will make a place where you can cross easily." Weasel Heart and Fisher filled their pipes and smoked, and then each started to cross the river. As each stepped into the water, the river began to go down and the crossing grew more and more shallow. The people with all their dogs followed close behind Fisher as he had told them to do. Fisher and Weasel Heart met in the middle of the river, and when they met, stepped to one side up the stream and let the people pass them. Ever since that day, this has been a shallow crossing. These lodges came from the underwater people, Suyetapi. They were those who had owned them and who had been kind to Weasel Heart and Fisher. End of The Buffalo Painted Lodges by George Bird Grinnell.
Of Blackfeet Indian Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by MCY. Blackfeet Indian Stories by George B. Grinnell. Chapter 13. Mikapi, Red Old Man. In Montana, running into the Missouri River from the south, is a little stream that the Blackfeet call "It Fell on Them." Once, long, long ago, while a number of women were digging in a bank near the stream for the red earth that they used as paint, the bank gave way and fell on them, burying and killing them. The white people call this Armel's Creek. It was on this stream near the mountains that the Piegans were camped when Mikapi went to war. This was long ago. Early in the morning a herd of buffalo had been seen feeding on the slopes of the mountains, and some hunters went out to kill them. Traveling carefully up the ravines and keeping out of sight of the herd, they came close to them, near enough to shoot their arrows, and they began to kill fat cows. But while they were doing this, a war party of Snakes that had been hidden on the mountainside attacked them, and the Piegans began to run back toward their camp. One of them, called Fox Eye, was a brave man, and shouted to the others to stop and wait, saying, "Let us fight these people. The Snakes are not brave. We can drive them back." But the other Piegans would not listen to him. They made excuses, saying, "We have no shields. Our war medicine is not here. There are many of them. Why should we stop here to die?" They ran on to the camp, but Fox Eye would not run. Hiding behind a rock, he prepared to fight, but as he was looking for some enemy to shoot at, holding his arrow on the string, a snake had crept up on the bank above him. The Piegan heard the twang of the bowstring, and the long, fine arrow passed through his body. His bow and arrow dropped from his hands, and he fell forward, dead. Now, too late, the warriors came rushing out from the pagan camp to help him, but the snakes scalped their enemy, scattered up the mountain, and soon were hidden in the timber. Fox Eye had 2 wives, and their father and mother and all their near relations were dead. All Fox Eye's relations had died, so it happened that these poor widows had no one to help them, no one to take vengeance for the killing of their husband. All day long, and often far into the night, these 2 sat on a nearby hill and wailed, and their mourning was sad. There was a young man named Mika'pi. Every morning when he awoke he heard the mourning of these poor widows, and all through the day he could not forget their sorrow. He pitied them. One day he sent his mother to them, to tell them that he wished to speak with them. When they had come to the lodge, they entered and sat down close by the doorway and covered their heads. "Listen," said Mika'pi. "For days and nights I have heard your mourning, and I too have mourned. Your husband was my close friend, and now he is dead, and no relations are left to avenge him. So now I say to you, I will take the load from your hearts. I will go to war and kill enemies and take scalps, and when I return they shall be yours. I will wipe away your tears, and we shall be glad that Fox Eye is avenged." When the people heard that Mika'pi was going to war, many young men wished to join him, but he refused. "I shall go alone," he said. So when he had taken a medicine sweat and had asked a priest to pray for him in his absence, he left the camp one evening just as it was growing dark. It is only the foolish warrior who travels in the day. The wise one knows that war parties may be out, or that some camp watcher sitting on a hill may see him far off and may try to kill him. Mika'pi was not one of these foolish persons. He was brave and cautious, and he had powerful helpers. Some have said that he was helped by the ghosts. When he started to war against the snakes, he traveled in low places, and at sunrise he climbed some hill nearby and looked carefully over the country in all directions, and during all the long day he lay there and watched, sleeping often, but only for a short time. When Mika'pi had come to the great place of falling water, it began to rain hard, and looking about for a place to sleep, he saw a hole in the rocks and crept in and lay down at the farther end. The rain did not stop, and when it grew dark he could not travel because of the darkness and the storm, so he lay down to sleep again. But before he had fallen asleep he heard something at the mouth of the cave, and then something creeping toward him. Then soon something touched his breast, and he put out his hand and felt a person. Then he sat up. Mika'pi stretched out his hand and put his palm on the person's breast, and moved his hand quickly from side to side, and then touched the person with the point of his finger, which in sign language means, "Who are you?" The stranger took Mika'pi's hand and made him feel of his own right hand. The thumb and fingers were closed except the forefinger, which was extended. When Mika'pi's hand was on the stranger's hand, the person moved his hand forward with a zigzag motion, meaning snake. Mika'pi was glad. Here had come to him one of the tribe he was seeking, yet he thought it better to wait for a time before fighting him. So when, in signs, the snake asked Mika'pi who he was, he replied, by making the sign of paddling a canoe, that he was a river person, for he knew that the snakes and the river people, or Pen d'Oreille, were at peace. Then the two lay down for the night, but Mika'pi did not sleep. Through the long night he watched for the first light, so that he might kill his enemy, and just at daybreak Mika'pi, without noise, strung his bow, fitted an arrow to the string, and sent the thin shaft through his enemy's heart. The snake half rose up and fell back dead. Mika'pi scalped him, took his bow and arrows and his bundle of moccasins, and went out of the cave and looked all about. Daylight had come, but no one was in sight. Perhaps, like himself, the snake had gone to war alone. Mika'pi did not forget to be careful, because he had been fortunate. He traveled only a little way, and then hid himself and waited for night before going on. After drinking from the river, he ate, and climbing up on a high rock wall, he slept. He dreamed that he fought with strange people and was wounded. He felt blood trickling from his wound, and when he awoke he knew that he had been warned to turn back. Other signs were bad. He saw an eagle rising carrying a snake, which dropped from its claws. The setting sun, too, was painted, a sure warning that danger was near. In spite of all these things, Mika'pi determined to go on. He thought of the poor widow's mourning. He thought of welcome of the people if he should return with scalps. He thought also of two young sisters whom he wished to marry. If he could return with proof of brave deeds, they would think well of him. Mika'pi traveled onward. The sun had already disappeared behind the sharp-pointed dark peaks of the mountains. It was nearly night. As the light grew dim, the far-stretching prairie began to be hidden. By a stream in a valley, where grew large and small trees, were the lodges of the great camp. For a long distance up and down the river rose the smokes of many fires. On a hill overlooking the valley sat a person alone. His robes was drawn close about him, and he sat there without moving, looking down on the valley and out on the prairie above it. Perhaps he was watching for enemies. Perhaps he was praying. Creeping through the grass behind this person, something was slowly drawing near to him. There was no noise. The watcher heard nothing. Still he sat there looking out over the prairie, and turning his head neither to the right nor to the left. This thing behind him kept creeping closer, and presently it was so near it could touch the man. Perhaps then there was some little rustle on the grass, and the watcher turned his head. It was too late. A strong arm around his neck bent his head back, and a hand covered his mouth. A long stone knife was thrust into his breast, and he died in silence. The fading light had kept people in the camp from seeing what had happened. The man who had used the knife scalped his enemy, and slowly, hidden by the grass, crept down the hill that he had just ascended, and when he reached the cover of a low place, Mika'pi rose to his feet and crept away. He had another snake scalp tied to his belt. His heart was glad, but he was not satisfied. Several nights had passed since the signs warned him to turn back, but notwithstanding the warnings he had succeeded. Perhaps his success had made him too confident. He longed for more of it. "One more scalp I shall take," he said, "and then I will return to the people." He climbed far up the mountainside and hid among the pines and slept. But when day came he awoke and crept out to a point where he could see the camp. He saw the smoke rising as the women kindled their morning fires. He saw the people going about through the camp, and then presently he saw many people rush up on the hill where he had left the dead enemy. He could not hear their angry cries, nor their mournful wailings, but he knew how badly they felt, and he sang a song, for he was happy. Once more the sun had disappeared behind the mountains, and as darkness grew Mika'pi came down from where he had been hiding and carefully approached the camp. Now was a time of danger. Now watchers might be hidden anywhere, looking for the approach of enemies, ready to raise a cry to warn the camp. Each bush, or clump of rye grass, or willow thicket might hide an enemy. Very slowly, looking and listening, Mika'pi crept around the outskirts of the camp. He made no noise, he did not show himself. Presently he heard someone clear his throat, and then a cough, and a little bush moved. Here was a watcher. Could he kill him and get away? He sat and waited to see what would happen, but he knew where his enemy was, but the enemy knew nothing of him. The great moon rose over the eastern prairie, and climbed high and began to travel across the sky. 7 persons swung around and pointed downward. It was about the middle of the night. At length the person in the bush grew tired of watching. He thought no enemy could be near, and he rose and stretched out his arms and yawned. But even as he stood an arrow pierced him through, beneath the arms. He gave a loud cry and tried to run, but another arrow struck him and he fell. And now from out the camp rushed the warriors toward the sound. But even as they came, Mika'pi had taken the scalp from his enemy and started to run away into the darkness. The moon was bright, and close behind him were the snakes. He heard arrows flying by him, and presently one passed through his arm. He pulled it out and threw it from him. Another struck his leg, and he fell, and a great shout arose from the snakes. Now their enemy was down, and revenge for the 2 lives lately taken was certain. But Mika'pi's helpers were not far off. It was at the very verge of the high-cut wall overhanging the river that Mika'pi fell, and even as the snakes shouted, he rolled over the brink into the dark rushing water below. The snakes ran along the edge of the river, looking into the water, with bent bows watching for the enemy's head or body to appear, but they saw nothing. Carefully they looked along the shores and sandbars. They did not find him. Mika'pi had sunk deep in the water. The swift current carried him along, and when he rose to the surface he was beyond his enemies. For some time he floated on, but the arrow in his leg pained him, and at last he crept out on a sandbar. He managed to draw the arrow from his leg, and finding at the edge of the bar a dry log, he rolled it into the water and, keeping his hand on it, drifted down the river with the current. Cold and stiff from his wounds, he crept out on the bank and lay down in the warm sunshine. Soon he fell asleep. When he awoke the sun was in the middle of the sky. His leg and arm were swollen and pained him. Yet he started to go home, and for a time struggled onward. But at last, tired and discouraged, he sat down. "Ah," he said to himself, "true were the signs. How crazy I was to go against them. Now my bravery has been useless, for here I must stop and die. The widows will still mourn, and who will care for my father and mother in their old age? Pity me now, O sun. Help me, O great above person. Give me life." Something was coming through the brush near him, breaking the sticks as it walked. Was it the snakes following his trail? Mika'pi strung his bow and drew his arrow from the quiver. He waited. No, it was not a snake. It was a bear, a big grizzly bear, standing there looking down at Mika'pi. "What is my brother doing here?" said the bear. "Why does he pray for life?" "Look at my leg," said Mika'pi, "swollen and sore. See my wounded arm. I can hardly hold the bow. Far away is the home of my people, and my strength is gone. Surely here I must die, for I cannot walk, and I have no food." "Take courage, my brother," said the bear. "Keep up a strong heart, for I will help you, and you shall have life." When he had said this, he lifted Mika'pi in his arms and took him to a place where there was thick mud. And there he took great handfuls of the mud and plastered it on the wounds, and while he was putting on the mud he sang a medicine song. Then he carried Mika'pi to a place where there were many service berries, and he broke off great branches of the fruit and gave them to him, saying, "Eat, my brother, eat." He kept breaking off branches full of large, ripe berries until Mika'pi was full and could eat no more. Then said the bear, "Now lie down on my back and hold tight by my hair, and we will go on." And when Mika'pi had got on his back and was ready, the bear started. All through the night he traveled on without stopping, and when morning came they rested for a time and ate more berries, and again the bear put mud upon the man's wounds. In this way they traveled on until, on the fourth day, they had come close to the lodges of the Piegans, and the people saw them coming and wondered. "Get off now, my brother, get off," said the bear. "There is the camp of your people. I shall leave you." And at once he turned and went off up the mountain. All the people came out to meet Mika'pi, and they carried him to his father's lodge. He untied the scalps from his belt and gave them to the poor widow, saying, "These are the scalps of your enemies. I wipe away your tears." Then every one rejoiced. All Mika'pi's women relations went through the camp, shouting out his name and singing songs about him, and all prepared to dance the dance of triumph and rejoicing. First came the widows. They carried the scalps tied on poles, and their faces were painted black. Then came the medicine men, with their medicine pipes unwrapped, and then the bands of the All Friends dressed in their war costumes. Then came the old men, and last of all the women and children. They went all through the village, stopping here and there to dance, and Mika'pi sat outside the lodge and saw all the people dance by him. He forgot his pain and was happy, and although he could not dance, he sang with them. Soon they made the medicine lodge, and first of all the warriors, Mika'pi was chosen to cut the raw hide to bind the poles, and as he cut the strips he related the coups he had counted. He told of the enemies he had killed, and all the people shouted his name and the drummers struck the drum. The father of those two sisters gave them to him. He was glad to have such a son-in-law. Long lived Mika'pi. Of all the great chiefs who have lived and died, he was the greatest. He did many other great things. It must be true, as the old men have said, that he was helped by the ghosts, for no one can do such things without help from those fearful and terrible persons. End of chapter 13.
Chapter 14 of Blackfeet Indian Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Lucy LaFaro, New South Wales, Australia. Blackfeet Indian Stories by George B. Grinnell. Chapter 14. Red Robe's Dream. Long, long ago, Red Robe and Talking Rock were young men in the Blackfeet camp. In their childhood days and early youth, their life had been hard. Talking Rock was an orphan without a single relation, and Red Robe had only his old grandmother. This old woman, by hard work and sacrifice, had managed to rear the boys. She tanned robes for the hunters, made them moccasins, worked with porcupine quills, and did everything she could to get a little food or worn-out robes and hide, from which she made clothes for her boys. They never had new, brightly painted calf robes like other children. They went barefoot in summer, and in winter their toes often showed through the worn-out skin of their moccasins. They had no flesh. Their ribs could be counted beneath the skin. Their cheeks were hollow. They looked always hungry. When they grew to be 12 or 15 years old, they began to do better, for now they could do more and more for themselves. They herded horses and performed small services for the wealthy men. Then, too, they hunted and killed a little meat. Now for their work 3 or 4 dogs were given them, so with the 2 the old woman owned, they were able to pack their small lodge and other possessions when the camp moved, instead of carrying everything on their backs. Now they began to do their best to make life easier for the good old woman who had worked so hard to keep them from starving and freezing. Time passed. The boys grew old enough to go out and fast. They had their dreams, each found his secret helper of mysterious power, and each became a warrior. Still they were very poor, compared with other young men of their age. They had bows, but only a few arrows. They were not able to pay some great medicine man to make shields for them. As yet they went to war only as servants. About this time Red Robe fell in love. In the camp was a beautiful girl named Mayamin, the Wing, whom all the young men wished to marry, but perhaps Red Robe loved her more than all the rest. Her father was a rich old medicine man who never invited any except chiefs and great warriors to feast with him, and Red Robe seldom entered his lodge. He used to dress as well as he could, to braid his hair carefully, to paint his face nicely, and to stand for a long time near the lodge, looking entreatingly at her as she came and went about her work, or fleshed a robe under the shelter of some travois over which a hide was spread. Then, whenever they met, he thought the look she gave him in passing was friendly, perhaps more than that. Wherever Mayamin went, her mother or some woman of the family went with her, so Red Robe could never speak to her, but he was often near by. One day when she was gathering wood for the lodge, and her companion was out of sight behind some willow bushes some distance away, Red Robe had a chance to tell Mayamin what was in his heart. He walked up to her and took her hands in his, and she did not try to draw them away. He said to her, "I love you. I cannot remember a time when I saw you that my heart did not beat faster. I am poor, very poor, and it is useless to ask your father to let me marry you, for he will not consent. But there is another way, and if you love me, you will do what I ask. Let us go from here, far away. We will find some tribe that will be kind to us, and even if we fail in that, we can live in some way. Now if you love me, and I hope you do, you will come." "Aye," replied Ma min', "I do love you, only you. All the other young men pass before me as shadows. I scarcely see them, but I cannot do what you ask. I cannot go away and leave my mother to mourn, she who loves me so well. Let us wait a little. Go to war. Do something great and brave. Then perhaps you will not uselessly ask my father to give me to you." In vain Red Robe tried to persuade the girl to do as he wished. She was kind. She threw her arms about him and kissed him and cried, but she would not run away to leave her mother to sorrow, to be beaten by her father, who would blame the poor woman for all the disgrace. And so too soon they parted, for they heard her companion coming, the sound of her heavy footsteps. Three Bulls, chief of the camp, was a great man. He had a fierce temper, and when he spoke, people hurried to do what he ordered, for they feared him. He never talked loud nor called any one by an ill name. When anyone displeased him or refused to do what he said, he just smiled and then killed the person. He was brave. In battle with enemies he was the equal of 20 men, rushing here, there, into the thickest of the fights, and killing, always with that silent, terrible smile on his face. Because he was such a great warrior, and also because he was generous, helping the poor, feasting any who came to his lodge, he was the head chief of the Blackfeet. Three Bulls had several wives and many children, some of them grown and married. Gray hairs were now many in his head. His face wrinkles showed that old age was not far distant. No one supposed that he would ever take another wife, so when the news spread through the camp that he had asked old Medicine Man for his daughter Ma min', everyone was surprised. When Red Robe heard the news his heart nearly broke. The old Medicine Man agreed to let the chief have the girl. He dared not refuse, nor did he wish to, for many good presents were to be given him in 3 days' time. When that was done, he told his daughter she would be taken to the chief's lodge. Let her prepare for the change. That day Red Robe had planned to start with a party to war, but when he heard this news, he asked his friend Talking Rock to take word to the leader that he had changed his mind and would not go. He asked his friend to stay with him, instead of joining the war party, and Talking Rock agreed to do so. Out in front of the camp was a large spring, and to that place Red Robe went and stood, leaning against a large stone and looking sadly down into the blue water. Soon, as he had thought, Ma min' came to the spring for a skin of water. He took her hands as he had done before, and began to beg her to go away with him that very night, before it was too late. The girl cried bitterly, but at first she did not speak. The two were standing in plain sight of the camp and the people in it, and someone went to the chief's lodge and told him what was taking place. "Go to the spring," said the chief, "and tell that young man to let the girl go. She is to be my wife." The person did as he was told, but the two young people paid no attention to him. They did not care what anyone said, nor if the whole camp saw them there together. All they could think about was this terrible thing which would make them unhappy so long as they lived. Red Robe kept asking the girl to go, and at last she consented to do as he wished. They had their arms about each other, not thinking of the crowd that was watching them, and were quickly planning for their meeting and for their going away that night, when Three Bulls quietly walked up to them and stabbed the young man with a flint-point lance. Red Robe sank down dying at the young girl's feet, and she, looking down for an instant at her lover, turned and ran to her father's lodge. "Bring wood," the chief called out. "Let everyone bring some wood, all you have at your lodges. Those who have none, let them go quickly and bring some from the timber." All the people hurried to obey. What Three Bulls ordered was soon done, for the people feared him, and soon a great pile of wood was heaped beside the dead man. The chief lifted the slender young form, placed it on the pile of wood, and told a woman to bring coals and set fire to the pile. When this had been done, all left the place except Three Bulls, who stayed there tending the fire and poking it here and there until it was burnt out and no wood or trace of a human body was left. Nothing remained except the little pile of ashes. These he scattered. Still he was not satisfied. His medicine was strong. Perhaps his dream had warned him. Now he ordered that the lodges be taken down, that everything be packed up, and that the trail of the moving camp should pass over the heap of ashes. Some time before this, after Red Robe had made his long fasting and his dream had come to him, and he had returned to his grandmother's lodge, he had told his true friend something of what had been said to him by his dream. "If I should die," he said, "and you are near, do not desert me. Go to the place where I fell, and if my body should have been destroyed, look carefully around the place. If you can find even a shred of my flesh or a bit of my bone, it will be well." So said my dream. Here are 4 arrows, which the dream told me to make. If you can find a bit of my body, flesh or bone or even hair, cover it with a robe, and standing over it, shoot 3 arrows one after another up into the air, crying as each one leaves the bow, "Look out!" When you fit the 4th arrow on the bowstring and shoot it upward, cry, "Look out, Red Robe! The arrow will strike you!" And as you say this, turn and run away from the place, not looking back as you go. If you do this, my friend, just as I have told you, I shall live again." As the camp moved, Three Bulls stood and watched it filing over the place of the fire, and saw the ashes scattered by the trailing ends of lodge poles and travois, and by the feet of hundreds of people and dogs. Still he was not satisfied, and for a long time after the last of the people had passed, he remained there. Then he went on across the flat and up and over the ridge. But presently he returned, once, twice, 4 times, to the crest of the hill, and looked back at the place where the camp had been. But at last he felt sure that no one remained at the place, and went on. Yet Talking Rock was there. He had been hidden in the brush all the time, watching the chief. Even after Three Bulls had passed over the ridge, he remained crouched in the bushes, and saw him come back again and again to peer over its crest. Still further on there was another higher ridge, and when the young man saw Three Bulls climb that and disappear on the trail of the camp, he came forth. Going to the place where his friend had lain, Talking Rock sat down and mourned, wailing long and loud. Back on the hills the wolves and coyotes heard him, and they too became sorrowful, adding their cries to his. The young man had little faith in the power of the 4 arrows that he kept so carefully wrapped in a separate bundle in his quiver. He looked at the place where Red Robe's body had been burnt. It was like any other place on the great trail that had been made, dust and grass blades mingled together, and scratches made by the dragging poles. It did not seem possible that anything of his friend's body remained. Yet he must search, and breaking a green willow twig, he began carefully to work over the dust, stopping his crying, for the tears blinded his eyes so that he could not see. All the morning long and far into the afternoon, Talking Rock swept the dust this way and that, turning it over and over, in a circle that grew always wider, and just as he was about to give up the search, he found a bit of charred and blackened bone. Was this a part of his friend's frame? Was it not more likely a bit of bone of buffalo or elk, which some dog had carried from one of the fireplaces of the camp and dropped here? Now for the test. Talking Rock covered the bit of bone with his robe, as he had been told to do so. He even raised the robe along its middle, making it look as if it really covered a person lying there. Then he shot 3 of the arrows up in the air, each time crying, "Look out!" Then, with a hand that trembled a little, he drew the 4th arrow from the quiver, shot it, and cried, "Look out, Red Robe, the arrow will strike you!" and turning, ran from the place with all his speed. How he wanted to look back! How he longed to see his friend was really rising from that bit of blackened bone! But Talking Rock was strong-hearted. He controlled his desires. On and on he ran, and then, behind him, the light tread of running feet, a firm hand gripped his shoulder, and a loved voice said, "Why so fast, my friend?" And stopping and turning, Talking Rock found himself face to face with Red Robe. He could not believe what he saw, and had to pinch himself and to hold his friend hard in his arms to believe that all this was real. The camp had not moved far, and the lodges were pitched on the next stream to the south. Soon after dark the 2 friends entered it and went to their lodge. The poor old grandmother could not believe her eyes when she saw the young man she had reared and loved so dearly. But when he spoke she knew that it was he, and running over to him, held him in her arms and kissed him, crying from joy. After a little time the young man said to her, "Grandmother, go to the chief's lodge, and say to him that I, Red Robe, need some dried meat." The old woman hesitated at this strange request, but Red Robe said, "Go, do not fear him. 3 Bulls is now the one to know fear." When the old woman entered the great lodge, and in reply to the chief's look, said, "Red Robe sent me here. He wants some dried meat." Only 3 bulls of all who were in the lodge showed no surprise. "It is what I expected," he said. "In spite of all my care he lives again, and I can do nothing." Turning to his wives, he said, "Give her meat." "Did you see Mamin?" asked Red Robe, when his grandmother had returned with the meat and had told him what the chief had said. "No, she was not in the lodge, but 2 women were approaching as I left it. I think they were the girl and her mother." "Go back once more," said the young man, "and tell 3 Bulls to send me that young woman." But now the poor old grandmother was afraid. "I dare not tell him that," she exclaimed. "He would kill me and you. His anger would be fearful." "Do not fear," said Red Robe. "Do not fear, my mother. His anger and his power are no longer to be feared. He is as feeble and as helpless as one of those old bulls one sees on the sunny side of the coulee, spending his last days before the wolves pull him down." The old woman went to the lodge and told the chief what Red Robe further wished. Mamin was there, her head covered with her robe, crying quietly, and 3 Bulls told her to arise and go with the messenger. Timidly at first, and then with steps that broke into a run, Mamin hurried toward the lodge of her sweetheart and entered it. With a cry of joy she threw herself into his arms, and Talking Rock went out and left them alone. Great now was the happiness of these young couple. Long was their life, full of plenty and of great honor. Red Robe became a chief, respected and loved by all the people. Mamin bore him many children, who grew up to be the support of their old age. End of chapter 14. Chapter 15 of Blackfeet Indian Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Lucy LaFaro, New South Wales, Australia. Blackfeet Indian Stories by George B. Grinnell. Chapter 15. The Blackfeet Creation. The Blackfeet believe that the sun made the earth, that he is the creator. One of the names by which they call the sun is Napi, old man. This is how they tell of the creation. In the beginning there was water everywhere. Nothing else was to be seen. There was something floating on the water, and on this raft were Old Man and all the animals. Old Man wished to make land, and he told the beaver to dive down to the bottom of the water and to try to bring up a little mud. The beaver dived and was under water for a long time, but he could not reach the bottom. Then the loon tried, and after him the otter, but the water was too deep for them. At last the muskrat was sent down, and he was gone for a long time, so long that they thought he must be drowned. But at last he came up and floated almost dead on the water, and when they pulled him up on the raft and looked at his paws, they found a little mud in them. When Old Man had dried this mud, he scattered it over the water, and land was formed. This is the story told by the Blackfeet. It is very much like one told by some Eastern Indians, who are related to the Blackfeet. After the land had been made, Old Man travelled about on it, making things and fixing up the earth so as to suit him. First he marked out places where he wished the rivers to run, sometimes making them run smoothly, and again, in some places, putting falls on them. He made the mountains and the prairie, the timber and the small trees and bushes, and sometimes he carried along with him a lot of rocks, from which he built some of the mountains, as the sweet grass hills, which stand out on the prairie by themselves. Old Man caused grass to grow on the plains, so that the animals might have something to feed on. He marked off certain pieces of land where he caused different kinds of roots and berries to grow, a place for camas, and one for wild carrots, one for wild turnips, sweet root and bitter root, one for service berries, bullberries, cherries, plums, and rosebuds. He made all kinds of animals that travel on the ground. When he made the bighorn with its great horns, he put it out on the prairie. It did not seem to travel easily there. It was awkward and could not go fast. So he took it by one of its horns and led it up into the rough hills and among the rocks, and let it go there, and it skipped about among the cliffs and easily went up fearful places. So Old Man said to the bighorn, "This is the place for you. This is what you are fitted for, the rough country and the mountains." While he was in the mountains he made the antelope and turned it loose to see how it travelled. The antelope ran so fast that it fell over some rocks and hurt itself. He saw this would not do, and took the antelope down on the prairie and set it free there, and it ran away fast and gracefully, and he said to it, "This is the place that suits you." At last, one day, Old Man decided that he would make a woman and a child, and he modelled some clay in human shape, and after he had made these shapes and put them on the ground, he said to the clay, "You shall be people." He spread his robe over the clay figures and went away. The next morning he went back to the place and lifted up the robe, and saw that the clay shapes had changed a little. When he looked at them the next morning, they had changed still more, and when on the fourth day he went to the place and took off the covering, he said to the images, "Stand up and walk," and they did so. They walked down to the river with him who had made them, and he told them his name. As they were standing there looking at the water as it flowed by, the woman asked Old Man, saying, "How is it? Shall we live always? Will there be no end to us?" Old Man said, "I have not thought of that. We must decide it. I will take this buffalo chip and throw it in the river. If it floats, people will become alive again 4 days after they have died. They will die for 4 days only. But if it sinks, there will be an end to them." He threw the chip into the river, and it floated. The woman turned and picked up a stone and said, "No, I will throw this stone into the river. If it floats, we shall live always. If it sinks, people must die, so that their friends who are left alive may always remember them." The woman threw the stone in the water, and it sank. "Well," said Old Man, "you have chosen. There will be an end to them." Not many nights after that the woman's child died, and she cried a great deal for it. She said to Old Man, "Let us change this. The law that you first made, let that be the law." He said, "Not so. What is made law must be law. We will undo nothing that we have done. The child is dead, but it cannot be changed. People will have to die." These first people did not have hands like a person. They had hands like a bear with long claws. They were poor and naked and did not know how to get a living. Old Man showed them the roots and the berries, and showed them how to gather these, and told them how at certain times of the year they should peel the bark off some trees and eat it. That the little animals that live in the ground, rats, squirrels, skunks, and beavers, were good to eat. He also taught them something about the roots that were good for medicine to cure sickness. In those days there were buffalo, and these black animals were armed, for they had long horns. Once, as the people were moving about, the buffalo saw them and rushed upon them and hooked them and killed them, and then ate them. One day, as the Creator was traveling about, he came upon some of his children that he had made lying there dead, torn to pieces and partly eaten by the buffalo. When he saw this, he felt badly. He said, "I have not made these people right. I will change this. From now on, the people shall eat the buffalo." He went to some of the people who were still alive and said to them, "How is it that you people do nothing to these animals that are killing you?" The people replied, "What can we do? These animals are armed and can kill us, and we have no way to kill them." The Creator said, "That is not hard. I will make you something that will kill these animals." He went out and cut some straight service berry shoots and brought them in, and peeled the bark from them. He took a larger piece of wood and flattened it, and tied a string to it, and made a bow. Now he was the master of all birds, and he went out and caught one, and took feathers from its wings, and tied them to the shaft of wood. He tied 4 feathers along the shaft, and tried the arrow at a mark, and found that it did not fly well. He took off these feathers and put on 3, and when he again tried it at the mark, he found that it went straight. He picked up some hard stones and broke sharp pieces from them. When he tried them, he found that the black flint stones made the best arrow points. He showed them how to use these things. Then he spoke to the people and said, "The next time you go out, take these things with you, and use them as I tell you. Do not run from these animals. When they rush at you and have come pretty close, shoot the arrows at them as I have taught you, and you will see that they will run from you or will run around you in a circle." He also broke off pieces of stone and fixed them in a handle, and told them that when they killed the buffalo they should cut up the flesh with these stone knives. One day after this, some people went on a little hill to look about, and the buffalo saw them and called out to each other, "Ah, there is some more of our food," and rushed upon them. the people did not run. They began to shoot at the buffalo with the bows and arrows that had been given them, and the buffalo began to fall. They say that when the first buffalo, hit with an arrow, felt it prick him, he called out to his fellows, "Oh, my friends, a great fly is biting me." With the flint knives that had been given them, they cut up the bodies of the dead buffalo. About this time Old Man came up and said to them, "It is not healthful to eat raw flesh. I will show you something better than that." He gathered soft, dry, rotten wood, and made punk of it, and took a piece of wood and drilled a hole in it with an arrow point, and gave them a pointed piece of hardwood, and showed them how to make a fire with fire sticks, and to cook the flesh of animals. After this the people found a certain sort of stone in the land, and took another harder stone, and worked one upon the other, and hollowed out the softer one, so as to make of it a kettle. It is also told that the Creator made people and animals at another place, and in another way. At the Porcupine Mountains he made other earthen images of people, and blew breath on the images, and they became people. They were men and women. After a time they asked him, "What are we to eat?" Then he took more earth and made many images in the form of buffalo, and when he had blown on them they stood up, and he made signs to them, and they started to run. He said to the people, "There is your food." "Well now," they replied, "we have those animals. How are we to kill them?" "I will show you." He took them to the edge of a cliff and showed them how to heap a pile of stone, running back from the cliff like this, with the point of the V toward the cliff. He said to the people, "Now do you hide behind these piles of stone, and when I lead the buffalo this way, as they get opposite to you, stand up." Then he went on toward a herd of buffalo and began to call them, and the buffalo started toward him and followed him until they were inside the arms of the V. Then he ran to one side and hid, and as the people rose up the buffalo ran on in a straight line and jumped over the cliff, and some of them were killed by the fall. "There," he said, "go and take the flesh of those animals." Then the people tried to do so. They tried to tear the limbs apart, but they could not. They tried to bite pieces out of the bodies, but they could not do that. Old Man went to the edge of the cliff and broke some pieces of stone with sharp edges, and showed them how to cut the flesh with these. Of the buffalo that went over the cliff, some were not dead but were hurt, so they could not run away. The people cut strips of green hide and tied stones in the middle, and with these hammers broke in the skulls of the buffalo and killed them. When they had taken the skins from these animals, they set up poles and put up the hides over them, and so made a shelter to sleep under. In later times the Creator marked off a piece of land for the 5 tribes, Blackfeet, Bloods, Piegans, Gros, Ventrers, and Sarsis, and said to these tribes, "When people come to cross this line at the border of your land, take your bows and arrows, your lances and your war clubs, and give them battle, and keep them out. If they gain a footing here, trouble for you will follow." End of chapter 15.
of Blackfeet Indian Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Blackfeet Indian Stories by George B. Grinnell. Old Man Stories. Under the name Napai, Old Man, have been confused 2 wholly different persons talked of by the Blackfeet. The sun, the creator of the universe, giver of light, heat, and life, and reverenced by everyone, is often called Old Man. But there is another personality who bears the same name, but who is very different in his character. This last Na Pai is a mixture of wisdom and foolishness. He is malicious, selfish, childish, and weak. He delights in tormenting people. Yet the mean things he does are so foolish that he is constantly getting himself into scrapes, and is often obliged to ask the animals to help him out of his troubles. His bad deeds almost always bring their own punishment. Interpreters commonly translate this word Na Pai as old man, but it is also the term for white man, and the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes tell just such stories about a similar person whom they also call white man. Tribes of Dakota stock tell of a similar person whom they call the Spider. The stories about this old man are told by the Blackfeet for entertainment rather than with any serious purpose, and when that part of the story is reached where Old Man is in some difficulty which he cannot get out of, the man who is telling the story and those who are listening to it laugh delightedly. Some stories of this kind are these. The Wonderful Bird. One day, as Old Man was walking about among the trees, he saw something that seemed very queer. A little bird was sitting on the branch of a tree. Every little while it would make a strange noise, and every time it made this noise, its eyes flew out of its head and fastened on a branch of the tree. Then after a little while the bird would make another sort of noise, and its eyes would go back to their places in its head. Old Man called out to the bird, "Little brother, teach me how to do that." "If I show you how," the bird answered, "you must not send your eyes out of your head more than 4 times in a day. If you do, you will be sorry." "It shall be as you say, little brother. It is for you to give, and I will listen to what you say." When the bird had taught Old Man how to do this, he was glad. He began to do it, and did it 4 times right away. Then he said, "Why did that bird tell me to do this only 4 times? He has no sense. I will do it again." So once more he made his eyes go out, but now when he called to them they would not come back. He shouted out to the bird, "Little brother, come here, and help me get my eyes back." The little bird did not answer him. It had flown away. Now Old Man felt all over the branches of the tree with his hands, but he could not find his eyes. So he went away and wandered over the prairie for a long time, crying and calling to the animals to help him. As he was blind, he could find nothing to eat, and he began to be very hungry. A wolf teased him a great deal, and had much fun. It had found a dead buffalo, and taking a piece of the meat, it would hold the meat close to Old Man's face. Then Old Man would say, "I smell something dead. I wish I could find it. I am almost starved." He felt all around for it. Once when the wolf was doing this, Old Man caught him, and plucking out one of the wolf's eyes, he put it in his own head. Then he could see, and was able to find his own eyes, but never again could he do the trick the little bird had taught him. End of chapter 16.